Well, hello and welcome to the Fireside Chat. My name is Mary Lito. I'm the Executive Director of Auxiliary Services here at Pace University. And I oversee the food service, the dining services, and one card here at Pace. About 10 years ago, Pace was in the process of replacing our old ID system. We were looking at software and hardware. We wanted a system that would be a little bit more functional for our students. And in the midst of looking at many proposals, we received one from a very small company in New Haven, Connecticut. The salesman told me that this company was created by 3 students who wanted a company that was for students and by students. And I was really intrigued. So as a purchasing person, I asked them to give me some references for some other schools. And there were only about 3 other schools that had signed on at the time. So I said, let me call these schools and see exactly what's going on with this little company. And I heard rave reviews about their implementation and how they could put it together in 3 months. It was unheard of. It was a software. They had a debit card that had full functionality and was actually tied to a MasterCard debit card. So I thought, this is really interesting. So I talked to the other schools. We took a leap of faith and we signed on with HigherOne. And 10 years later, all of you students are now carrying the HigherOne ID card here at Pace.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for coming. Also have to thank Mary for bringing this opportunity. And I'm excited to hear the story. And I just thought I'd start with a question about your entrepreneurial journey. We heard you were born in Texas, brought up in San Francisco, and came to Connecticut to Yale to do your degree. Did you always have an idea to be an entrepreneur or to start a company? Was there anything early in your life that made you think about entrepreneurship and starting a business, or was it just an opportunity that presented itself at the time?
Happy to talk about that. First, I want to thank you, Bruce, for hosting and getting a tour of the Entrepreneurship Lab earlier. Looks like some exciting stuff going on here. And thank you, Mary, for being one of our first clients and believing in us even when we didn't have a long track record. So it's been great to have a long association with Pace University as a client of HigherOne. Really appreciative there. Your question about how did I personally get started in entrepreneurship? It does help to have role models in your life, I believe. Both my parents had a different take on entrepreneurship in one way or another. In running their own things, they actually both were involved in starting the yoga journal, for example, but had some other things that they did. So it was nice to see that, and I think that helps. Also, growing up in San Francisco, maybe there's something in the groundwater there. And
tell us about that time in college, that life in college. Obviously, we're in a college. The students that are here are thinking about entrepreneurship in one way or the other, or at least trying different ideas and all. Can you tell me a little bit about the start of the idea, not actually launching the company, but how that idea came about, how you found the 2 other partners, and what the early life of starting the company was like, and just the day-to-day life. Was it between classes, and just what was the impetus of the actual the idea and the venture?
We did start HigherOne while we were students, so we were in such a rush to build something great together, and saw there were so many problems in the world to be solved that we didn't wait until we graduated. That's not necessarily something I endorse for everyone. Certainly a lot of challenges that go along with that, but for us it was really the right thing. We met each other at Yale building the Yale Entrepreneurial Society. People imagine, I think, that we must have been drinking buddies first, but that came second. First was more getting to know each other as co-founders and co-workers in building this society that was aimed at providing networking and educational opportunities, both for students, alums, and others in the community, and really impacting the culture at Yale to have more of an entrepreneurship tone. And one of the first things we did together was launch the business plan competition at Yale, which still goes on annually. And I remember we held an event in October with an instigation and kind of after some conversations with some professors and some administrators, but still with only $200 in the bank, we held an event like this in a multifunction room at Yale and said, we're going to give away $50,000. And we did literally have $200 in the bank. So we were confident that we could raise it. I don't know what that confidence was based on entirely, but we ended up doing that and ran the entrepreneurship contest, and that's been going on since. That experience brought us together, and we were saying, we're helping other people launch businesses. We want to do this too. And we had, as students, understood the student experience and how many students many universities had not adopted technology as quickly as we thought could be used to improve student service, and had some insights from our experience as students, different problems we wanted to solve. It just kept coming back to financial services, particularly tied in with ID cards or debit cards, and kept talking about that. And you asked sort of about the early life and the first steps that we took. We went and talked with potential customers. That's something I recommend to all entrepreneurs. Is it's really never too early to talk to someone who would be your customer. You'll sometimes hear from folks that, oh, well, I have this special connection and I don't want to use it until I'm further along. I'm a big believer in start now. I mean, you'll be surprised how long it takes to get the meeting, or what you'll learn at that meeting. You'll be surprised how far you can get based on a good presentation or a dialogue or some mock-ups or something. So we went and visited university CFOs, and you can imagine how those conversations went when you were saying, look, I'm going to handle tens of millions of dollars and help you move it around more efficiently. And they're looking at these 20-year-old kids thinking, what is this?
And that's the perfect segue to my next question. So once you started that, it's great that you were planting the seeds of a broader entrepreneurial culture, and you looked for a problem to solve, and then you go out and talk to customers. That's incredibly important these days. A big hot term is the lean startup method. Get out there and talk to customers. Do a minimal viable product, rapid iteration.
Which little known fact, Eric Ries, who's famous for coining that term as a Yale alum, was in class 2001 with me, or really? 2000, yeah. Okay,
and Eric is the entrepreneur resident at Harvard, and just published a book called The Lean Startup. So, but going from the school to the business and going out and talking to companies. So it's not just that it's a new company or maybe a company on paper, and it's not just that you're 20-year-olds and financial services with money, but these kinds of systems have to be really integrated into the school, and its infrastructure, its payment systems, and everything else. How were those initial calls? I mean, it seems like it would be hard enough to get a meeting. So can you walk us through what those initial calls meeting was and what it took to get the first university to sign on the dotted line and effectively be a guinea pig, for lack of a better word? And I imagine if things went very poorly, that person who signed the contracts head could be on the block, so to speak. So what was it like doing those initial calls and getting someone to sign on the dotted line?
Yeah, to your point, for your initial customers, sometimes they can have a lot at stake, and so they have to really believe in the vision. When we were early on, we got introductions through people we knew to potential customers, actually largely in Connecticut. One of my jokes is the reason we didn't have a Connecticut client for a while was because I was responsible for the Connecticut region sales initially. But we had enough of those conversations to learn more about the market and what the needs were, and used that to inform our early product development efforts. Helped us form our business plan and really understand what the opportunity was. So that's part of the reason those early conversations are important, even if you don't initially sign the first person that you talk to. We were able to grow the team a little bit after we had raised some money and made some progress in product development, brought in a head of sales who had experience in the higher education market, had some contacts and relationships, and that certainly helped us get our first full client for full launch of the program. It was actually University of Houston, not a small school, 35,000, 40,000 students, but the CFO there really shared the vision and said, I've been looking for a solution like this for years. And so that was the reason that he was willing to, go on that journey with us, knowing that it wasn't live somewhere else. It wasn't something that had been proven before.
And what was that, just that actual contracting, for lack of a better word, like the actual nuts and bolts of, I don't know if there was an RFP process or a very detailed contract, or was it an initial test rollout, and how, walk us through what it took to actually, close the deal and go down to Houston and implement it.
The process there was a sole purchase. Most of our contracts, I would say, good majority of our contracts are through an RFP, a formal buying process, and that tends to be certainly more these days as the market's more established and there are companies that are competing with us more. Originally, when we were bringing services to market, there was a less defined solution to delivering financial aid to students and other payments out. So the original contract, I believe, was a sole source. We worked with a law firm to craft a contract and put in front of them and negotiate it as you would with any customer, and certainly take some time to navigate that process. But the real key part, as you pointed to earlier, was having a customer who believed in the vision enough to take that first step down the path with you.
Okay, and then did the next few sales come much easier, or was there a period of several years that everyone was a fight before it really became a purely sales exercise, as opposed to a convincing people that this is a viable product type exercise? So was it after 2, 3, 4? I think PACE was number 5. But at what point did it become a real company that you had enough established sites and understood the procurement process? I don't want to say that it became easy, but that it became more routine.
That's a good question. I feel like at every point you're still selling yourself, but certainly the company picked up momentum after a few years, and the sales process became more of a conversation of talking with references, and particularly in the higher education market, existing references, ability to talk to clients where it's live, where they have a real experience and they can speak to what it's like to work with you, is really important. I think that having a proven solution, having references can be important in other B2B markets, but in higher ed, I think even more so. It's really critical. We have sales processes that can begin with references and end with references, checking 10 and 20 references, which is, I think, something you don't see in a lot of other industries.
Okay, and then once you got that initial sale, someone believed in your vision. The next sales still work, but as references built, it became easier. Once things started to take off after, as you said, about 3 years, one thing that amazes me in these high growth companies is just the ability to scale up, to be able to attract, talented people. I mean, just to grow, to order enough desks and phones and people and systems to handle everything. Can you talk about that, managing that rapid growth and going from a flat entrepreneurial organization to some hierarchy and structure and systems and bureaucracy? But how do you manage the growth?
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge, and one that we recognized as a key risk that we wanted to manage. So you have to spend time on that. It's not just the execution tasks that you talked about, the nuts and bolts of how you scale a business, but it's also the management organizational systems, the culture. We've spent a lot of time on being very clear about what our values are, communicating those to prospective employees and people coming into the organization, making sure they spend time learning about that, as well as the specifics of what you're executing. Just from a personal experience of that, it's quite interesting going through the cycle of, to give an example that you're talking about, of a flat organization and adding more. There was a point in time where I was personally managing the install of every ATM that we had on campuses, which is part of our service. and then I was managing someone who was doing it, and then I was managing someone else who was doing it. At some point, you're multiple people removed from that, and just going through those different layers, you have to understand the process in a different way and a different level, which has just been, for me, part of what's kept me excited and engaged, is that, you know, I'm really driven by a passion for learning, and learning things at multiple levels like that has been really fun.
So I think that point about culture, and you know, that an organization is only as great as its people, and there's all these theories on strategy, resource-based theory and all that. I really think it with people and the culture, and I think the most successful company in American business history is actually in a very competitive industry. It's not a high-tech company, it's Southwest Airlines in terms of return on equity. And one thing that the airline is known for is, you know, really building a very, very strong culture and not growing too fast that it weakens the culture. Can you talk a little bit about the recruitment process? How did you find people that would meet that culture that you had in mind? Like, was it through your university connections, other people? Is it online? Is it just interviewing a lot of people? And then a little bit about the kind of the training process to ensure that culture is instilled.
Yeah, we've recruited through all of the above. I mean, all of the methods that you could think of: personal networks, recruiting firms, online. I mean, all have played a key role in different hires, depending, you know, what we were looking for. We've had an emphasis on employee referrals, and have had an employee bonus program for a long time in terms of referring people. You know, when someone's willing to, who works at HigherOne, is willing to say, "This person, I recommend them," you know, that means a lot, because they know the internal culture and they know what it takes to succeed, plus they're putting at risk a little bit of their reputation, you know, to bring someone else in. So I personally, you know, find employee referrals to be a really meaningful and important source of recruiting. In terms of, you know, that recruiting process and looking at cultural fit, you know, part of it is making sure people meet a number of folks within the organization. We've also had a program where any new person coming into the organization to work a full-time regular role meets one of the senior management, and for a long time that was one of the founders. We're now big enough that it's not just the two of us, but, you know, having people meet more than just their immediate supervisor to get a sense of the large organization and mission, I think helps on the front end, emphasizes how important we believe having the right people in the organization is. And then we spent time, we spent a lot of time on our onboarding process and you know, mapping that out so that people have, you know, some of it's basics, just making sure you've written down what you expect from people, articulating your culture, but others of it are things like having a buddy, having orientation sessions with the founders for every new employee. We have a culture book that we publish now. I think we're in maybe the third year of, which we've had a lot of success with, where each employee is given the opportunity to write in their own words, what is the experience like to work at HigherOne? We publish that in a book with pictures of employees and events that we've done. And that's something that, you know, prospective or new employees can read to get a sense of, you know, not just sort of what do I think of the culture, what do I write about it, but what does each individual employee say? And I think that gives a great view on the organization.
In 2008, you started another company, See, Click, Fix. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, I'd imagine running HigherOne is a full-time job. What, can you tell us a little bit about the other company? What, you know, led you to pursue that, and maybe tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I have a real passion for learning and a passion for entrepreneurship, and the early stages are very exciting. So a few years ago, decided that I was ready to start another business, and looked at constantly running across problems that need solving, but, you know, really saw again the government industry as being one where information technology was under-adopted, and that's you know, an area that I'm passionate about. So I started researching, you know, what solutions existed out there and sort of what existed, and ended up talking with one of my friends in New Haven, and he had a real personal experience with trying to get some graffiti removed from a wall and calling City Hall and leaving voicemails and just not working. And so between those two things, we kind of came together with C-Click-Fix, which comes from the name of, C, a problem, an infrastructure issue like a pothole or graffiti or a broken street light. Click, as in, take a picture, upload it with your mobile phone, click on the website, make sure it's documented publicly, and then notify out all interested parties. It could be a neighbor, could be City Hall, and then gets fixed either by government or by other interested folks. And in the meantime, can be voted on, discussed, weighed against other issues. And when I started the company early on, us founders, all of us were doing it nights and weekends. We really took a real startup approach of first saying, for the first weekend, let's literally just make it a weekend. We'll set a time limit for ourselves. We'll try to build some kind of product and see if we, A, still like working with each other, B, still have interest in this problem, and C, can come up with anything interesting. And so by the end of the weekend, we had, based on top of Google Maps, we had a basic website where you could click on the map and highlight an issue and send it out to a few friends. And we kind of took that iterative model, given that it was a B2C approach in many ways. We just kind of let it out in the wild, and some users in New Haven started using it and just started building on it more. Nights and weekends, again, I didn't have kids then, so it meant for more free time. And decided to incorporate, at one point we looked at, social entrepreneurship, nonprofit models, but we decided to turn it into a for-profit company, incorporated, and the other co-founders went full-time. And I was still very much involved in building HigherOne and passionate about where we were headed. So I'm on the board of C-Click-Fix and have been involved in fundraising and strategy and some of the early stuff. But it's just been a lot of fun being involved in another venture.
Yeah, they say if you want to get something done, give it to someone who's very busy. And was it almost like a hackathon where people come together? That it was interesting. You said you decided that weekend.
Well, it was just the three of us, but yeah, we had a hackathon in my condo for the weekend essentially, and it wasn't a fully fledged product, but it was something that people could get a sense of what we were talking about, and it was enough for us to work together as a team, understand that we were still interested in the problem.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about your vision, like for HigherOne. Can you talk a little bit about what you'd like to see HigherOne be in the next 5 to 10 years? Is it a matter of getting to more schools or different products or more depth or maybe international?
Yeah, so HigherOne has grown over the years. I think, as Mary mentioned in the intro, we serve schools representing over 10 million students. And we've done that also by growing the product suite. So we started with initial product of helping schools move money out to students and providing a checking account that students could use to manage that money. And we've added to that, helping schools manage moving money in, electronic billing, cashiering software, tuition payment plans, etc. And we've also added a product line in data analytics, so helping schools turn information into data and make better resource allocation decisions. For example, identifying students who are at risk for leaving school, for example. So we really see, the mission of HigherOne is helping to make higher education better for both schools and students through the application of technology, really wrapped in service. So not just, here's a pile of software, you figure it out. Really with an approach of understanding how higher education works, working closely with university administrators to meet their goals. And in terms of the future, what does that bring? Certainly want to bring our solutions to more schools. We think there's a lot of opportunity there. Not all of our current clients are using all the different solutions we offer, so that's certainly important for us. We do have some business in Canada and are open to how we can help universities beyond that. So I think that's a possibility, and certainly we'll look to expand the product suite where it makes sense.
Okay. And then on a broader question, surely we'll open it up to any questions from the audience. But on broader question of entrepreneurship. These days with the hyper-competitive, globalized economy, and harder for students, graduates to get a job, and so many industries being reinvented and turned on their head and disintermediated and made extinct in one area, and brand new companies come up in another. There's been a lot of talk of the role of entrepreneurship education in not just colleges and universities, but even K through 12 education. How it's important to prepare students for a new career where it's not going to be lifetime employment, more or less, in basically the same industry with relatively the same skill set, where recent graduates are going to have to figure out how they could add value and kind of be CEO of State Your Name Here. And there's some interesting books on that, Tony Wagner, Creating Innovators and all. But given your experience, not just working with schools, but as an entrepreneur, and being close to colleges and universities, do you have any thoughts on what the role of entrepreneurship education may be in both college or even K through 12, and what students should be doing to prepare themselves for this new hyper-competitive, globalized world?
I think some of the fundamentals of entrepreneurship are about seeing possibility, believing that problems are meant to be solved, and using the resources that are available to solve them. So, not taking the first answer, not taking the normal conventional way to look at things, and really believing there has to be a way. And all of those things apply whether you're starting your own business or, like you said, chartering your own career. So I do see a lot of skills in parallel that can be made there.
And as far as advice for the students, either in how they might prepare for a career at college, or advice for students that are thinking of launching a business, any words of advice, warning, caution, thought, etc.?
I think I touched on it earlier, but I'm a big believer in go talk with potential customers sooner rather than later. Also, I believe that most, if not all, of the businesses worth starting will have a chicken and egg problem. So figuring out how to solve that is part of the key to getting the business off the ground. It's not a sign that you have a problem with kind of your business model necessarily. I could go on and on. I don't know, any particular area you're interested in?
Well, as far as maybe the best thing is to let the students ask, but you talked about at Yale how you created the Entrepreneurship Club and the business plan competition because it wasn't there. And obviously Yale is an extremely well-respected university with a very long history. Why wasn't that there? And that obviously served a very important purpose. Are there things other universities should be doing, or opportunities that students should be paying attention to more than just grades and required classes? Just general advice that you would think. Obviously the students that are here know because they're here. But any just broad thoughts for students as far as how to get the most of the collegiate experience, whether class, extracurricular, other activities, and just any specific thoughts that they're thinking of starting a business. They seem like insurmountable problems. Where do I find the money? How do I get those first contacts? Do I need the experience first?
Yeah, there's a lot there in what you just brought up. I do believe that for success, I think more and more people are talking about how some of the softer skills are even more important than ever. A sense of going to university to learn a particular knowledge set, like I'm going to have this fixed set of facts, and that's going to let me be successful, is really obsolete. It's about learning enough of the field so that you can continue learning, because the field's going to have evolved within the next couple of years. And so the other skills about how to learn new things, how to work in a team environment, things around emotional intelligence, how to motivate other people or how to sell. I mean, any opportunities to get that kind of experience, as well as, obviously there's some fundamental hard skills that you need, but you can't stop there.
Another topic with education and kind of skills students should have for this workplace is the idea of coding, that coding is going to be as important, as knowing how to just use a computer was before, people just had manual typewriters. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I believe a lot of what you were able to do is because you had that coding knowledge as a CS student. How critical is that these days, and is that something that students should either be taking in school as an elective class or something like the Code Academy, or is that something, if you don't have that skill, you just find someone that does, or is it really going to be a critical skill almost no matter what you do?
I think computer literacy is important for everyone, pretty much regardless of your career going forward. I don't think necessarily hands-on coding is important for everyone. If you want to be a technology entrepreneur, an understanding of technology is pretty important. For HigherOne, I didn't do that much hands-on coding, very, very little. But my understanding of what were the important technical trade-offs, the ability to communicate with engineers and understand what they were working on, I think did make a big difference and does even ongoing today. So those types of things are important. I've heard this argument that sort of everyone should be a coder, and if you haven't, I would say try it, but I wouldn't feel like if you're not passionate for that, you're going to be a failure in every career. I just don't buy into that.
So thank you, Miles, and thank you all for coming out.